I've said this before actually in a previous video, but I grew up in a family that had lots of disposable income, and I never had to worry where my next meal was going to come from. We didn't have to move around a lot. Beyond that, I also would oftentimes get the newest and shiniest toy for Christmas. But I think that my family was actually really good at raising me without any sort of hyperfixation on materialism or striving for a materialistic lifestyle. There's much more emphasis on achieving happiness through quality time. And again, I had lots of material things growing up as a kid, but I think the things that brought me a lot more joy were things we got to do together as a family rather than getting a new pair of shoes. When I turned 19, I decided I wanted to get in contact with a financial advisor. I wasn't making a lot of money, or I guess I was making the amount of money you would expect a 19-year-old to be making, but I wanted somebody to teach me how to invest and somebody more professional than me to monitor all of my spending habits. He asked me very point blank, are you a material person or are you an experienced person? And I very confidently said, I'm an experienced person, sir, and he gave me that little nod of approval. This is an ethos that kind of came from my dad that was instilled into me, but I'd always kind of trusted the idea that you can't take these items to the grave with you, so it's not really worth fixating on them while you're alive. It was my confidence in this whole ethos that kind of spiked my anxiety when I started to become friends with some people who were more material oriented, and also my salary started to go up a little bit. If you're unaware, men tend to be more thing oriented and women tend to be a little bit more people oriented. This is a biological proclivity that predates me, it predates my father, my grandfather, my great-great-grandfather. This has been well documented for a while now. Journal of Purdue and some other researchers and institutions have already kind of commented on this. It has to do with how we socialize, how we learn, how we strategize. It's really part of our identity. But until I researched this topic, I was fucking mind blown by all the coincidences I was experiencing. My dad recently introduced me to one of his male coworkers, and it just so happens that he also loves exotic cars, motorcycles, vintage guitars, watches, and pinball. So then I'd go to work and I'd casually bring up this really cool interaction I had with this guy to all my male coworkers. Turns out they also all love motorcycles, exotic cars, vintage guitars, watches, and pinball. And anytime I put a cool picture on my Instagram story of an exotic car, a motorcycle, a watch, a vintage guitar, or a pinball machine, tons of men are flooding my inboxes. We are very simple creatures, it turns out. All of these instances running back to back have really led me to question and flesh out my thoughts on materialism. I'm asking myself questions like, is materialism okay? Is materialism real? Why do I like material things? Is it just a crutch for me to lean on when my financial advisor asks me why I just spent thousands of dollars on a new vintage guitar? The first reason that I usually see people's interest in material items grow is for financial reinvestments. I wouldn't necessarily say that I fall into this category. I have a little bit more trust in the stock market, and I have made some good financial moves in the past with material items, specifically music gear, but I tend to not do the deep dive on things all the time, like go into that deep rabbit hole, because just like the stock market, there's a lot of fluctuation and nuance that can happen to the market value of material items over time. Plenty of people probably trust themselves a lot more than I do when it comes to estimating the appreciated nature of material items. And a lot of people, mostly men to be honest, who are just sharks when it comes to understanding appreciation over time of vintage items or real estate or very collectible items, even if they're not that interested in them personally. Beyond that, I think that a lot of other men kind of get a high off of that transactional aspect. I think in some way, it's some people's version of just marrying their love of things and their love of making money. But the danger occurs when you're unable to part ways with those things that you were originally looking to sell. Another potential danger of getting things for the sake of financial reinvestment is they have to take really pristine condition of them. If it's a car, you can't drive it. If it's a nice guitar, you can't play it out at shows. I think for these reasons, I'm not a materialistic person for the sake of making money. I think at most I just try and buy things that I think aren't going to lose money. Then, of course, there's the collector. The first image that comes to mind when I think of the collector is somebody who plays golf and likes to collect a flag pin at every course that they play. It's a way to remember an experience, and it kind of incentivizes them to get out there and play more courses. It's kind of like collecting Pokemon gym badges. You want to complete a set of something, whether it's for you or for the validation of others. Collecting is an extremely old tradition. Even Neanderthals would form these coalitions to go collecting seashells or rocks. I found myself over the years wanting to complete a set of things every once in a while. Like, if the new line of guitars comes out and they make them in 4 different color variants, then I think it'd be really cool to own one of each. Or I know people who love collecting Rhodes pianos because they want to complete the set of all key size variations. One thing I've picked up on over the years though is that it doesn't really seem to be that collecting the item itself is what scratches the itch. It's the chase. Distance often makes the heart grow fonder, but that's not just for people. It can be for items. The rarity of an item often supersedes its practicality. Things that are really hard to acquire often develop this cult following, and to the people who are insiders and really love those things, represent more than just the sum of the materials. For example, many people collect watches. but only 170 people are afforded the opportunity to collect a Tiffany Blue Patek Philippe Nautilus. There are much rarer watches that I could have chosen, but I chose this one for two reasons. One, because it's not special because it's vintage. This watch came out in 2021. And two, because it doesn't have any extra capabilities, or in the watch world, we call them complications. It has one complication, which is the date, which is a pretty normal complication to have on a watch. It's usually the first one that's added. Other than that, though, it doesn't sing you a song when the hour hand hits on the dot. It doesn't tell you the moon phases. It doesn't act as a stopwatch or anything. It just tells you the date and the time. The practicality is not what intrigues these collectors, though. It's the rarity that they're after. Generally speaking, there's a positive relationship between the difficulty in actually acquiring a rare item and the amount of drool coming out of a man's mouth when he gets to fantasize about actually owning it. I used to think, probably like some of you who are watching this, that was the quickest way to become unfulfilled and probably financially broken. Just obsessing over things that have no added practicality. Trying to collect multiples of things or establish this empire of items would mean nothing to me. And then I started to learn about the true power of its ability to connect you with others. I spoke a little bit about this in my Rolex video, but this kind of serves as like this metaphorical key to the castle that is male bonding. I cannot tell you how easy it was to start connecting with other people in my class when I was in 4th grade, when I started to collect gym badges in Pokemon, which, by the way, once you actually own the game, costs $0. It was like a way to show your determination or your respect towards this subset of culture. Like when you walked into snack break and showed little Jimmy your Sunny Shore City gym badge, he knew that you were in the fields f***ing grinding XP on your flying and water type Pokemon. When someone walks into your studio and sees that you have all 4 base 6 reissue color combinations on your wall, they know that you were staying up till 3 a.m. to hit the button on the pre-sale order before they sold out in like 6 minutes. When you're golfing with someone and you see that they have a Pebble Beach club towel, then you know that they waited 2 painstaking years just to go and get frustrated and hit 11 balls into the beautiful Pacific Ocean. In the experience world analog, this is kind of just like having the same job as somebody. Kind of just collect the same experiences. A doctor and a medical student can connect quickly because of their shared experiences. And the discussion has a lot of room for growth because one of them hasn't collected the same experiences as the other, and one of them gets to share their love for, or maybe disdain for, the experience of collecting them. Collecting actually used to be a very primal method of attracting partners. In this sense, I've actually kind of come to appreciate materialism, and I've only really dug my teeth into collecting a few kinds of things, but the payout for me personally of being welcomed into this larger community has been absolutely worth it, and at the very least has kind of changed my mind about collecting things. Holding hands with the collector, as I called it, would probably be the history buff. This historical subset of materialistic people are actually way more significant than I'd once thought they were. When I was doing research for this video, I was trying to find information on my Sun Model T, which is a guitar amp that I own from 1974. I was trying to find information on like the production numbers or the sales rollout, and I could not find anything. I searched everywhere. Hours. Couldn't find anything. I checked through Reddit, through TikTok, through YouTube. I looked at available and ended listings on marketplaces like Facebook Marketplace and Reverb and eBay. It made me kind of sad because the creators of Sun amps, which are these brothers named Conrad and Norm Sunholm, well, there's not really many interviews of them out there, and they are getting pretty old. Or would you believe me if I told you that the Gibson EB0F, which is this bass guitar made by Gibson from 1962 to 1965, and was played by people like Bill Wyman of the Rolling Stones or Philip Lesh of Grateful Dead, has 2 videos about it on YouTube. 2 on all of YouTube. And they're not even informational videos. They're like 30-second 8-bit resolution videos of people playing it. It was an extremely rare variant of the somewhat popular EB0 made by Gibson. We made about 20,000 of them, and only about 265 of them are EB0Fs. But they're so unpopular that there is only one listing I've ever seen ever for sale of one of these. So for me personally, collecting an item like this kind of scratches that urge of wanting to collect all the data and the history behind this thing, piece together all the pieces of the puzzle, and put together some sort of cohesive body of work outlining this seemingly forgotten piece of music history. I mean, to me, it's a part of history that should be preserved. Something I've changed my mind about over the years as a huge car enthusiast is car collectors. I used to really despise people who would collect their beautiful, pristine Ferrari F40s or McLaren F1s in their garage and just let them collect dust. But then I started to change my perspective that they're kind of trying to keep this part of history alive. Side note, even though I can't personally collect Ferraris, there's actually been a little bit of a craze on this topic over the last few years on the internet. So much so that there's actually been some really awesome mini documentaries by people like VinWiki talking about how Ferraris actually lied about production numbers over the years. In this has sent collectors and historians of Ferrari into a frenzy, trying to just put all these pieces of the puzzle together. It's connected thousands of people all over the world to try and chip in their own knowledge of the story, try and make sense of it all. I mean, I think that above all else, they just don't want this history to be forgotten. Some people also purchase new items because they want to accept the responsibility of being one of the bookkeepers. Karen Green recently sold her original launch 8GB iPhone from 2007 for, wait for it, $63,000. CBS News says that Green received the iPhone in 2007 as a gift from her friends after landing a new job, but since she'd already gotten a new phone, she decided not to open it. Green said, quote, "I didn't want to get rid of my phone, and I figured it's an iPhone, so it's never going to go out of date." Her friends likely bought this phone for her for $500. Oftentimes, if a manufacturer predicts that the item that they're about to release to the world is going to be significant and potentially change history or revolutionize an industry, they'll usually keep a copy of it, or maybe two, at different museums across the world. But it's the items that we could have never predicted how large their impact would become that were in real danger of losing their history. Over the years of my collecting, which I guess isn't that long, you could say that I've been particularly interested in the sleeper items, or the black sheep. I kind of enjoy rooting for like the lesser known or lesser desired models of things. I kind of just think that it's my way of appreciating materialism from the perspective of preserving its history. I've purchased some new items in hopes of kind of enriching the community around that thing, and I've also purchased some vintage items in hopes of keeping that community alive. For the vintage items, I kind of feel the obligation because they weren't really around for the advent of the internet. It was a lot harder to document and track these things. There's so much content of me on the internet now that it'll be really easy for my future kids or family members or fans to understand who I was after I'm gone. But some of these items have like zero digital footprint and pretty much zero owners who actually know how to use the internet. So whatever I can do to keep the torch burning for some of these items, I will gladly do. Then there's the enthusiasts. You might be asking, well, Sam, aren't all of these people enthusiasts? Yes, it's true, but these are the groups of people that are particularly interested in the very fine details and nuances of an item. If you collect Pokemon cards, you might be familiar with PSA grading. PSA stands for Professional Sports Authority, and they're kind of like the leading authority on assessing the condition and the value of cards. So if you get a card that's assessed by PSA, it then becomes PSA graded. There are some Pokemon cards that can't reach the highest level of PSA grading, which is PSA level 10, unless they were literally just manufactured that way. And enthusiasts are the ones who can look at a Pokemon card with such fine detail that they can tell you if it came with the abnormality from the manufacturer that will allow it to become a PSA level 10. This includes the placement of certain graphics, or the way that the card was cut itself, or the image and the focusing of the graphic. You can kind of think of it like on Pawn Stars whenever Rick has to be like, "You mind if I get my guy in here? He knows a lot about these things."
Do you mind if I have someone check it out?
And it's just a guy who has dedicated his entire life to studying that thing. The enthusiast knows every quirk and feature about these items, including the criterion that it must meet to be considered valuable. Or you can think of it like how a paleontologist uses radioactive carbon dating to get ultra fine comparisons to other bones. I mean, it's just a specific person's job to tell all of the nuances and details of an item. The Porsche 911 has gone through many generations since its debut in 1963. Come on, I couldn't make a video about this without talking about 911s. Many surface level or armchair enthusiasts will be able to tell you what generation the car belongs to based on the headlights or the taillights or the wheels. But there are some potentially very obsessive enthusiasts out there who could tell you all the ultra fine details of each of these models. Details that make them more rare than others. Some people can tell you based on the carbon weaving of the paint itself if this car has been repainted from the factory or not. Or some people can geographically locate for you which specific countries this 911 was manufactured in based on the center control stack. There are some ultra exclusive 911s that to most normal fans just look like a normal 911. But to the enthusiast, that's a 1 of 1,963 50th edition 911. That's a 1 of 60 GTS Club Cooper. That's the 1 of 2 993 Speedster. So generally speaking, there's a lot of overlap between the historian kind of materialists and then, you know, the enthusiasts. But I think the general difference between the two is that the historian takes a very wide net approach trying to collect all this data across many variants, and then the enthusiast is somebody who just specializes in one niche variant. The overlap between these two in the Venn diagram, however, is that they're not really motivated by actually owning the item. I've connected with lots of people in different watch communities who don't even own the watch that they love, but they can tell you with 99% certainty whether the one that you just posted in the group chat is real or fake. The enthusiast will definitely enjoy flexing his hyperfixation muscle. I mean, they just love obsessing over the small details. There's something really beautiful about that for some reason. I've really learned to appreciate these people over time. I mean, I've just learned to connect with people over the craftsmanship of certain items, or these just really weird oddities or abnormalities or imperfections imperfections that have put such a spotlight on a specific variant of an item. So my thoughts on materialism have kind of changed over the last couple years. My friends, who I had previously wrongfully assumed maybe didn't fully understand the value of experiences, have shown me the joy of things, honestly. And a lot of these things I don't even own, or really have any desire to own. I'm a very simple person, probably, though not definitely, and I don't think that owning any amount of material items is ever going to make my life perfect, but I will admit that it was kind of itching something that I wasn't scratching. I think for one, it kind of allows me to just think a little bit more critically about market trends and appreciation, and I also think that it really helps me bond with others, which is super important. I think in moderation, chasing something, for me at least, is kind of healthy. It just gives me something to look forward to, and I think above all else, it truly just deepens my respect in the history books of all these items that I didn't really know existed, and I didn't really understand why it was important for it to be preserved. 3 small things I want to touch on before I end this video. There's some sentiment attached to some items that I own that would really never allow me to part ways with them. Even though I'm not an enthusiast about the item, I'm not a historian about the item, and I am not a collector of the item. My PRS Custom 24 in McKenna Blue is the first real nice guitar that I ever got. I got it when I was 13, and it will probably never leave my possession so long as I'm not homeless and just starving on the streets and have to sell it. And even then, I don't think I could ever bear to sell it to somebody who wouldn't promise me that I could be the first person to buy it back if they were ever selling it. It has always been the first guitar to my left. It has just deepened my love for the guitar, and I don't think that I could ever go anywhere without it. I don't find myself particularly interested in like the history of PRS, although, I mean, I guess not yet, maybe I will be. I don't know anything about any of the odd variants of my PRS. I don't even know if I'll ever buy another one, to be totally honest, but I just can't ever see myself parting ways with this thing, and I think that that's totally reasonable. 2, there are some material items that I collect for actually very practical reasons, but I also really enjoy them from a bit more of a academic or empirical stance. I recently got really into Eurorack when I bought a video distortion Eurorack module from somebody on Reverb, and I didn't even know what Eurorack was when I bought it. I still remember messaging the seller who lived in Australia and just being like, hey man, I think DHL might have broken it in the process, and I sent him a picture of it, and he just politely corrected me and told me that I was a fucking dumbass, and that's how Eurorack modules look. I then got super into audio Eurorack systems, and I started building my own modular synth. I use this in some of my cover work and some of my original work, but really I just do it for the enjoyment. But Eurorack isn't really something you can collect to completion. There are thousands of modules that are being built every single year, and it would just be impossible to keep up with it. And beyond that, systems that are really small are really complicated to understand, including mine. I don't think that if you gave me a lifetime, I could understand every single complexity and nuance of my own system. But there's so much cool math and routing and just weird physics and sound design that goes into Eurorack that I've just fallen hopelessly in love with, and I love collecting Eurorack modules now. I know 0 other people who are actually into Eurorack in person, so I can't really bond with anybody, which sucks. And I also know that it's not really something that you just collect to completion, and I honestly know very little of the history, and I have no fucking clue of all the nuance of all the things that I own in my system, but I mean, I'm trying my best, and honestly, that's enough for me. Also, it is so complicated sometimes, so I'm just gonna pat myself on the back. I love the practicality element of it, but also I just love the deep kind of critical thinking aspect of it. And 3, I've tried to make an effort this year to get particularly interested in items that maybe I don't love that much, but people that I love really love. I've always kind of liked cameras, but it wasn't until this last year that I decided to take the dive into it, because I really wanted to try and connect with my best friend Amory and try and understand why he loves them so much. I wanted to immerse myself in this subset of culture that would allow me to better connect with my best friend or people like Zach or Trevor and just see why they love them. I'm a complete novice, to be honest, but I love just being like the wide-eyed, eager kind of student that they get to just show off all their knowledge to me for, because honestly, this means a lot to them, and I think they really enjoy having somebody to kind of take under their wing. I love when Trevor and I get to sit down and talk about Fuji recipes for hours, or when Amory and I get to talk about cool shots that he wants to add into a new video and how maybe I can help him achieve them. On the flip side, when my girlfriend sees a 911 driving down the street and says, "See that 996 back there? Man, those headlights are ugly," I can just feel the waterworks coming. I think it just means a lot when people take interest in the things that you're interested in. And I think that's the larger point I want to get across in this video, even though it might be represented through material items. There's a lot of solid ground to attack the desire for owning material things, but I hope that this video gives you a new perspective on why it's just another facet of human connectivity and creativity. Some people just want you to ask how their day went today, and some people want you to know why you hate the 2nd generation red knob Model Ts. For me, it's both. You don't even really have to own things to get into materialism. I'm not telling you that you should go drain your bank account to go buy a 911R, right? Everything in moderation. But maybe we can just destigmatize it a little bit so we can connect with people on things that they maybe just dream about owning, or not even dream about owning, things that they just dream about, period. Feel free to comment about your newest obsession, or maybe just interest if you're not that deep into the rabbit hole, as it always generates a very interesting dialogue in the comment section. Thank you all so much for watching. Make sure to like, subscribe, and comment any future videos you would like to see down below.